I'm Nora, standing backstage. The soft hum of the crowd outside and the gentle rustle of programs fill the air. The marquee of the community theater proudly reads, "A Streetcar Named Desire starring Nora Thompson." I look at myself in the mirror, framed by warm bulbs. The woman staring back at me is no longer the scared girl who once fled into the cold night with a baby in her arms. My hair is shorter now, with copper highlights, and my posture exudes a quiet confidence born from surviving hardships and learning to move forward. As I adjust the satin strap of my costume, I can't help but smile at the faint laugh lines around my eyes. These are not signs of age, but evidence of the peace I've fought so hard for. Just then, there's a soft knock on the door. "Mom," my son Leo calls, his voice gentle. I open the door to find him standing there in his neatly pressed shirt, holding a small bouquet of daisies. "Grandma helped me pick them," he says, his eyes shining with pride. I kneel down and kiss his forehead. "You're my good luck charm," I tell him. He looks at me with concern. "Are you nervous?" he asks. I shake my head gently. "Not anymore." In the auditorium, my parents, Jack and Lily Thompson, sit in the front row, their hands folded, their faces glowing with quiet pride. My father leans over to my mother and whispers, "She did it. She really built it all back." The lights dim, and the orchestra begins to play its first soft note. Backstage, I take my mark. My heart beats steadily, not from nerves, but from purpose. The stage manager gives the cue, and as the curtain rises, the familiar rush of theater light washes over my face. For a moment, I stand in the glow, listening to the applause swell from the darkened rows beyond the footlights. I see the faces I love, Leo sitting tall in his seat, my parents smiling, and I feel no trace of bitterness, no shadow of the man who once made me feel small. Only gratitude and peace fill me as I deliver my first line. But it wasn't always like this. 5 years ago, I was a 22-year-old girl from a small coastal town. The ocean met the horizon there, and my dreams felt as vast as the sea. I came to the city with a backpack, a scholarship to the local community college's theater program, and an unwavering belief that a small town girl could make her mark. I worked at a coffee shop near the community theater. During the day, I'd pour coffee for regulars and memorize scripts between shifts. I always smelled faintly of coffee and the scent of the theater. One late September afternoon, I was wiping down tables when a man walked in, holding the hand of a little boy. His name was Ryan Miller. He was a police officer, and in his uniform, he looked a bit out of place in the coffee shop. He was tall and quiet, with a tired but kind expression. The boy, around 6 or 7, was clutching a crumpled flyer for a children's play, The Pirates of the Caribbean. "They're sold out," Ryan told the boy softly, kneeling down. "We'll catch the next one, buddy." I heard the disappointment in the boy's voice, and something in me, the same part that made me love the theater, couldn't let it go. I knew the ticket clerk from my evening rehearsals, so I walked over and whispered something to her. A few minutes later, Ryan and the boy slipped into 2 back-row seats, grinning as the lights dimmed. After the show, Ryan waited by the door, the boy fast asleep on his shoulder. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I owe you." I smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. Everyone deserves a little magic sometimes. That was the start of our relationship. The next day, I found a single sunflower wrapped in paper on the coffee shop counter with a note that said, "For the girl who believes in magic." Ryan started stopping by after his shifts. He was always polite, always asking about my rehearsals. He listened when I talked about my favorite plays and my dreams of moving to Los Angeles. He said I reminded him of something real in a world that had lost touch with its emotions. Our first date was a walk along the river. He brought thermoses of coffee, and we watched the lights dance on the water. I'd dated before, but the boys I'd met always talked more about themselves than about dreams. Ryan was different, grounded, gentle, and he noticed the little things. As weeks turned into months, he started bringing me dinner between rehearsals. He'd wait in the lobby with a quiet sense of pride. He told me I was the only real thing in his life, and I believed him. By winter, I couldn't imagine a future without him. My friends from the theater joked that I'd fallen headfirst in love, and they were right. To me, our love felt like a beautiful story finding its stage, simple, pure, and destined to last. 3 months later, when the snow had melted into slush, Ryan and I got married at the county courthouse. The ceremony was quick, less than 10 minutes. There was no music, no bouquet, just our signatures, his leather jacket, and the faint smell of coffee on my coat. Ryan said it didn't make sense to waste money on a wedding when we could save for our own place. I agreed easily, thinking that simplicity was a sign of maturity and that love didn't need a grand show to be real. After the wedding, we had lunch at a diner across the street. Ryan ordered a burger, while I barely touched my salad, too busy looking at the gold band on my finger. He gave me that quiet, reserved smile that had first drawn me in and promised that things would get better. He talked about long-term goals like buying a small house, getting a used car, and starting a family when the time was right. It all sounded so safe and comforting. We rented a one-bedroom apartment near downtown. It wasn't much, thin walls, old carpet, and a window that didn't close properly. But I decorated it with second-hand curtains and framed playbills for my performances. At night, I'd rehearse lines softly while Ryan dozed off on the couch. It felt like a domestic life I'd never known before, ordinary but warm. Ryan worked long night shifts as a police officer at the local precinct. He often came home just before sunrise, exhausted and smelling faintly of coffee and the city. I'd leave for the coffee shop or my rehearsals just as he crawled into bed. Our lives were like 2 pages in a book that didn't quite line up. On my lunch breaks, I'd write in my journal. I'd write about how tired he was, but how good he was, and how I thought we were building something steady. But small cracks started to show. Ryan started talking less, his smile became shorter, and his eyes seemed distant when I talked about my plays or my dreams of moving to Los Angeles. When I mentioned an audition or staying late to rehearse, he'd frown and say, "You don't have to chase all that. We have a good life right here." There were no big arguments at first, just a quiet dullness seeping into our relationship where there used to be laughter. I told myself it was normal, that all couples settled into a routine. But sometimes, when I came home after rehearsal and found him already asleep, I'd feel an ache I couldn't explain. The dream I'd brought from my hometown still flickered inside me, but it was growing dimmer, like a light trying to shine through a thick fog. Then, one day, I found a pregnancy test on the bathroom counter. The single blue line turned into 2. I stared at it, my hands trembling. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then I laughed through tears, pressing a hand against my chest. It felt like the world had tilted on its axis, terrifying and miraculous all at once. I waited for Ryan to come home, rehearsing in my head how to tell him the news. When he finally walked through the door, smelling of the cold night air and coffee, I met him in the kitchen. "Ryan," I whispered, smiling nervously, "I have something to tell you. We're going to have a baby." He froze. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. "A baby?" he repeated flatly. His eyes didn't light up like I'd hoped. They just stared at me, cold and calculating. "Yes," I said softly. "I know it's a surprise, but..." He cut me off. "You really think we can afford that right now?" The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. I blinked, my smile fading. "I thought you'd be happy." "Happy?" He gave a short, bitter laugh. "You're working part-time at a theater that barely pays minimum wage, and I'm pulling double shifts just to keep up with rent. How exactly do you think this works, Nora?" I swallowed hard. "We'll manage. People do it every day. We'll figure it out." He shook his head. "You should think about, options." My stomach turned. "Ryan, no. Don't even say that. This is our child." But the tenderness that had once filled his eyes was gone. Over the next few days, his sarcasm turned into cruelty. Every meal became a complaint, every expense a lecture. "Maybe your folks can send more seafood from the coast," he'd sneer. "They're good at that, right? Fishing and hard work." I bit my tongue until it bled, hiding my tears when he wasn't looking. I told myself he was just scared, that men didn't always know how to handle responsibility. Late at night, I'd sit on the edge of the bed, my hands on my small belly whispering, It's okay, little one. He'll come around. He has to. When my parents heard the news, they offered to have me come home until after the baby was born. My father, Jack, had a strong, calm voice. You don't have to stay there, honey. You and that baby will always have a place here. But I refused. I need to believe he'll change, I said quietly. I couldn't bear the idea of failure, of being another small town girl who ran back home when life got hard. I wanted my child to grow up seeing their father as a good man. One spring day, my father drove into the city in his old pickup truck. The truck bed was loaded with boxes, homemade preserves, and a quilt my mother, Lily, had made. He hugged me tightly at the door, noticing the circles under my eyes and the forced smile on my face. Thought I'd check in on you, he said, looking around the cramped apartment. Not much space for a little one, huh? I blushed. We're managing. Ryan's been talking about getting a place of our own soon. My father nodded and pulled out a thick envelope from his jacket, placing it on the counter. This is from the sale of that old fishing boat. It's not a fortune, but it'll give you a start. Use it for something that's yours. When Ryan came home from his shift and saw the money, his tired face lit up for the first time in weeks. This could really help us, he said eagerly, turning to me. My folks might be able to pitch in, too. Maybe we can finally stop renting. The next weekend, he drove me across town to an old house near the industrial area. It was a run-down 2-story house with peeling paint, a yard full of junk, and a broken fence. It was my grandpa's place, Ryan explained. He moved into a nursing home last year. My parents said we could have it if we fix it up. It's not much now, but it could be. I looked around at the cracked steps, the sagging porch, and the dirty windows. Inside, the air smelled of mold and dust. The walls were stained, the kitchen sink was rusted, and every window whistled in the wind. But I saw more than just decay. I saw possibility. It just needs some love, I said softly. Ryan smiled, and for a moment, the old spark returned. Exactly. We can make it ours. Over the next few weeks, the old house became our project. Ryan contacted some contractors he knew from work, and I spent every free moment cleaning. I scraped the grime from the walls, scrubbed the floors until my hands ached, and picked out paint colors from the clearance section at the hardware store. My father's money paid for everything, new appliances, plumbing repairs, and even the front door Ryan insisted on replacing. When the workers finished, the old house looked almost new. The walls were bright, the air smelled of fresh paint, and sunlight poured through the clean windows. One evening, I stood in the living room, my hand on my rounded belly, imagining our future there. For the first time in months, I felt sure that I'd made the right decision to stay. But as the weeks went on, Ryan's attitude changed. He started talking more about the money he'd saved by managing the renovation and how lucky we were that his grandfather had let him have the place. I noticed that the word "we" disappeared from his sentences, replaced by "I" and "my." I tried to brush it off, thinking he was just tired or didn't realize how his words hurt me. I told myself that this was what marriage was all about: compromise, patience, and understanding. One quiet Sunday morning, I was tidying the nursery when I heard Ryan talking in the next room. His voice was low and casual. Yeah, Mom, it's finally done. My house looks great now. Yeah, I'll send you pictures once I get the new furniture in. The words hit me like a punch in the gut. My house. I froze, the folded blanket in my hands slipping to the floor. For a long time, I just stood there in silence, looking at the soft yellow walls I'd painted myself. Then I bent down, picked up the blanket, and kept folding. I didn't say anything when he hung up. I just smiled when he walked by, pretending not to have heard. I told myself that peace was more important than pride, and maybe if I just stayed quiet, it would start to feel like home again. When Leo was born, the hospital room smelled of antiseptic and warm blankets. Outside, snow was falling slowly past the window. I was exhausted but happy, holding my newborn son in my arms. Leo's tiny fingers curled around mine, as if anchoring me to the world. For the first time in months, everything felt right. I whispered his name, and my heart swelled with love. When Ryan came into the room, I smiled weakly. He's perfect, isn't he? I said, my voice soft with relief. Ryan stared down at the baby for a long time, his expression unreadable. Then he muttered almost under his breath, "He doesn't even look like me." I froze. "What?" He shrugged, forcing a laugh. "I'm just saying, maybe he takes after your side. Relax." But the cold, distant tone in his voice made my chest tighten. Back at home, that tone turned into something even harsher. Ryan started watching me differently, his eyes following me as I moved around the house. When I mentioned Leo's doctor appointments or the sleepless nights, he'd grunt without looking up. Then came the comments, first quiet, then cruel. "Funny how he's got none of my features," he'd say while flipping through TV channels. "You always were friendly with those theater guys." "Ryan, stop it," I'd whisper, bouncing Leo in my arms. "You know that's not true."
Sure.
"You're a manipulative little actress, Nora. Always putting on a show. Guess this was your best role yet. Poor devoted wife, trapped with a baby you tricked your husband into having." I couldn't recognize the man in front of me. The gentleman I'd fallen in love with was gone. I tried to reason with him, reminding him of the home we'd built, the promises we'd made at the courthouse. We said we'd face everything together. I pleaded one night, my voice breaking. Ryan laughed, cold and hollow. "Together? You use me for a house. Don't act like this was ever about love." I felt my knees weaken, but I didn't let him see me cry. Instead, I held Leo tighter, knowing that he was the only good thing that had come out of this mess. One evening, as I was folding laundry, Ryan leaned in the doorway, his arms crossed. "Pack your things," he said calmly, almost casually. "You and that kid are not my problem anymore." I looked up at him, my throat dry. For a moment, I searched his face for the man I'd once trusted, but there was nothing left, just contempt and exhaustion. I said nothing. I simply picked up Leo and held him close, knowing that whatever lay beyond that door couldn't be worse than staying there another day. That night, the cold air outside felt like shards of glass through my coat. Leo whimpered softly against my chest as I stepped into the freezing dark, my heart pounding louder than the wind. Inside, Ryan's angry muttering echoed through the walls, fading as I walked down the narrow stairwell for the last time. I didn't take much, just a diaper bag, a few clothes, and my son. Everything else could rot with the memories I was leaving behind. In the car, I called my parents with shaking hands. As soon as I heard my father's voice, my own voice cracked. "Dad, I can't stay here anymore." My father didn't ask questions. "I'll be there in the morning," he said simply. By dawn, the sound of his old pickup truck rattled through the quiet street. When I opened the door, he didn't say a word at first. He just pulled me into a hug, his flannel shirt smelling of the ocean and salt. Over his shoulder, I could see the anger in his eyes, a quiet but intense anger like a smoldering fire. He looked around the house, taking in the new walls, the fresh paint, and the appliances shining under the kitchen light. "You did all this?" he asked. I nodded, my voice small. "With your money. Every bit of it." My father's jaw tightened. He looked at me, then at Leo sleeping in my arms. "Then we're taking it back," he said quietly. "If he took everything from you, we'll take back what's ours." Within an hour, he had called 2 contractors he knew from